one unusual phenomenon that I find, and I find myself slipping in this habit. Um, I'll demonstrate it first through a story. Many years ago, in fact, it was on the day of 9/11. I was hanging out with a friend of mine by the name of Aziz, and we were at his cigarette store. And I had just recently applied for a job with TSA. Actually, I had applied at the DFW airport for their police, fire, and EMS position. Had made it through all the testing. I was in the final 100 out of 800 and something applicants, but there were only 2 positions open. So there were 100 of us fighting for those positions. And they were in the process of background checks. And I remember while I was standing there, we were talking about what had happened the morning of 9/11. And I asked him, what do you know about this? Because A, he came from the region, and he used to be a United Nations ambassador for that region. And so he's very familiar with a lot of the players. So as we chatted, he was explaining some of the things that he knew and how he'd been trying to get through to explain some of that stuff. And the phone rang, and it was someone in customer service who was trying to work out a problem on a credit card charge. And after several minutes of him trying to have a conversation with this guy, nothing was working. Part of it had to do with the fact that he still has a thick accent and struggles a little bit with some dialect of the English language, especially from the Northeast. So after several minutes of yelling at each other, he handed me the phone and just said, work this out. And so I spoke with the person at the other end of the line, and we got all the details worked out. I got what they needed to have. I got him what he needed to have, and it was all solved. A few minutes later, someone else walked into the store to purchase something. Now, I'm just a guest. Mr. Aziz actually owns the place, but he was at the register, and I was sitting at the back with my laptop, and this guy began to get rude and irate and obnoxious and just started to berate him and said, listen, forget it. Just, you obviously don't know what you're doing. You're a moron. You can't even speak the language. Go back to your home country. Get me your boss. And I thought the irony of that statement, knowing that, only a decade before, Mr. Aziz had actually taught at the University of Kabul in psychology and religious studies. He had served the United Nations as an ambassador to the United States for his nation. He is not an average dummy. He's a very intelligent, very educated kind of guy. But the assumption that, A, he was intellectually challenged because he didn't know the language, and B, that because he was intellectually challenged and didn't know the language, someone else had to be his boss, was fascinating to me. And I think we tend, and I have to be consciously aware of it myself, when I have to teach someone something that to me seems really simple, that I make sure that I don't become arrogant in what I'm teaching and presume that I know everything else they don't know. So last night, I was asked to help a friend load some information for a publishing process that he's been working on to get a book published. Now, mind you, this book is over 400 pages with half a dozen contributors. 2 of those contributors have PhDs, 1 with a master's degree. The book is written in another language, so I can't do much with the content or the searchability or anything of that nature. But I'm familiar with the publishing process if you're self-publishing. And so there were things that he didn't know about this process, or where to load certain information, or what information to put in each box. And so I was helping him with that. And it's real easy, again, to feel like, oh, wow, that's a really simple question. What makes him even qualified to write a book? If that's a really simple question, why can't you figure that out just by looking at it? And it's hard sometimes to understand that we've got to divest our own understanding of a given topic. We've got to let that go for a moment and realize that we don't know everything. And there are a lot of people who know a lot of things that we've never even scratched the surface on, who don't know what we do know. So there's a very powerful word, especially in learning and training. This word is called collaboration. It's a matter of looking at my greatest strengths, my greatest skills, my greatest assets, my greatest gifts, my greatest understandings, and knowing that my greatest is someone else's weakest. They don't know what I know. And the exact opposite is also true. What they know, what they understand, what they've applied, what they've mastered, what they've figured out, you know nothing about. Now, you can either compete with each other. Well, I know this and you know nothing about it, and that makes me a superstar or makes me special or makes me better or gives me an opportunity that you don't have. Or we can collaborate and say, tell me what you know that I don't know. Share some experience with me that you don't have. There's a great way to learn just by asking questions. It's one of the reasons that I love to do interviews. The interviews that I do for Meet the Messenger and for Transforming Grace are all about getting to know other people, other things, other experiences that I've never had access to. So after we finished our process last night, he treated my wife and I to dinner. And over dinner, we had a chance just to get to know each other a little better. Now, I've known this guy for a little over a year and a half now. But every time we talk, there's a little more revelation, a little more understanding, a little more knowledge. And so I asked him last night, you have been in different roles. One of his roles in the past was a pastor. Now he is a father. He has 2 grown sons. And so he's been a father and he's been a pastor and he's been a university professor at multiple levels. He holds a PhD. So he's taught at the seminaries. He's taught at, I believe it was Princeton, if I'm not mistaken, taught theology and taught education. His degree is in education. And so I was just kind of poking around going, so what exactly is it that you teach? Do you teach this is the Old Testament, this is the New Testament, this is how they're different? I mean, what does it mean to have a PhD in Christian education? And so as we dug a little bit deeper, I asked him about a phenomenon that I've seen, and specifically in his arena, about pastors. And it happens in arenas around it as well. We've talked on this program before about the low barrier to entry. You can call yourself a life coach if you just feel like it. You can call yourself a DJ if you just feel like it. You can call yourself a landscaper or a painter. In fact, the quote that I shared yesterday from Seth Godin points that fact out very solidly. What he said was, because we can self-choose, self-select, self-appoint, I decide today I want to be a baker. I can go start making donuts and cakes and cookies, and there's no one to tell me I can't. There's no business law that says you can't be. Now, I can't just go be an attorney and start practicing law, or be a doctor and start practicing medicine, or be a dentist and start ripping teeth out of people's heads. There are still barriers to those types of business because they have the public health interest and the public safety in mind. You can't just go pick up a gun and become a vigilante and call yourself a cop. It doesn't work that way. There are still rules and regulations to that. But the majority of businesses, the majority of industries today, the barrier to entry is so low, anyone can self-select and say, I want to be. And because of that process, because there's so much information on the web and so many things that we can access, the knowledge to do that is also lower. And the gatekeepers can no longer manage quality control. The gatekeepers have lost control, for an example, in the world of publishing. My first attempt at a book had no one on the publishing editorial side to look at it and go, that's crap. Don't publish that. That cover is hideous. The content in there may be good stuff to start with, but good grief, don't do that. It's an embarrassment. There was nobody to tell me that, so I did it. And if you find that first copy, please set it afire. It is crap. It really is. It's ugly, it's hideous, and it wasn't compiled well, and it wasn't put together right, and it didn't have... But there was no barrier to entry to stop me from making a fool of myself. So as I had this conversation with this gentleman who holds a PhD in Christian education, I asked him this question that's kind of haunted me, and that is, why is it that there are churches just popping up all over the place? I mean, we have some mega churches that have 50, 60,000 people in them, and then we have the average Joe church of 85 to 100 people, and then you have what we would consider the medium-large church, which would be anywhere from 300 to 1,000, and then many people would say if you're over 1,000, you're a mega church. there are some churches that run around 1,500, and that's a good size for them. And then there are mega churches with multiple campuses and thousands of people. And yet, every day, there's another dozen or so people who say, I'm going to be a pastor. I'm going to start my own church. I'm going to go plant a church here or plant a church there. Or I had a church there, it didn't work out well, I'm going to do it here. And so I asked him, I said, have you been a pastor? Is that something that you've considered? Because right now he's working in a job that he's not real happy in, but it's a job that puts food on the table and pays the bills. And I said, well, you've got this great degree, you've got this great educational background, you've got all this history of doing these things. Why are you doing what you're doing and not pastoring? He said, well, I did pastor for a while. I said, well, I know you did in your home country, but what about here? He said, I did pastor here almost 10 years. I said, well, why aren't you doing it now? He said, it's too far to drive. I thought, well, that's interesting. Now, does that mean that you gave up the calling? He said, no, it was co-vocational. The congregation needed a pastor, but they didn't have the money to pay a full-time pastor, so they were only paying part-time, and I still had to work another job. So between working 2 jobs, studying and teaching, and pastoring a church, and not making any more money than I was on my other job, it financially and emotionally and physically didn't work out well. Yet he did it for 6 years. And so I look at that process and I said, well, how come so many people are just planting churches left and right? I feel like, just my own personal opinion, is that a lot of them see it as a business opportunity. I don't really want to get a job, and I feel like this is something that's necessary, or it's something that's an opportunity that doesn't have a huge barrier to entry, like being a life coach or being a chef or being a caterer, or there's so many things that you can jump into with just the upfront investment cost, and there's really no one to tell you can't. And he said, well, I agree that that's a problem. He said, in fact, there are a lot of immigrants that come to the United States, and because no one knows where they came from or what they were doing back home, and there's really no way to prove it, they come here and instantly call themselves pastor or call themselves bishop, and they start a congregation that meets in a hotel or a movie theater or a local clubhouse of an apartment complex, and they build a church. And he said, the challenge is many of them don't really want to be a pastor. They don't know what it means to shepherd people. They don't know what it means to deal with the marriage that's in crisis, or deal with the teen that's threatening suicide, or deal with the family that just lost their home, or deal with the guy that just lost a job, or deal with the wife who just lost her husband. All of those messinesses of life, they're not equipped for. They've never been trained for those things. They've never had conversations around those things. What they want to do is just stand up and teach the word. They just want to teach people how to be successful in life so that they will give on Sundays. And then they tell them, you will be more blessed if you'll give on Sundays. So that means you need to go get a job and not just live on welfare. You need to go get a job so that you can give more on Sundays. So now they're working Monday through Saturday so that they can give on Sundays, so that they can support the church for a pastor who doesn't really want to work. I said, well, that's kind of a scary process. He said, it is, but there are thousands of them. Thousands of them. And if you were to look at them by any other standard, they have zero credentials to do what they're doing. They haven't had a day of Bible school. They haven't had a day of counseling or pastoral counseling. They haven't been trained for anything. They just feel like, I know the language, I know the people, I know their culture, I know what they need to hear, and I've studied the word. And so I'm going to pastor them. And I got to thinking about how often we find ourselves in that very narrow juxtaposition of, I have a calling, I have a talent, I have a gift, I have a burning passion to do XYZ, whatever it is. I know that that's what I'm made for. I know that I'll be good at it. I know I can make an impact at it. And by golly, I want to do it. And at the same time, we have very little restriction in doing XYZ. And so there's really no balancing point to say, okay, well, if you want to start a church, start a coaching business, build one of these, you have to go through these hurdles first. Now, I'm not a big fan of government regulation. I'm not a big fan of rules and laws. I've been a law bender breaker most of my life, and I don't mean federal laws and criminal law. I mean, whatever rules were set in front of me, I like to push them and kind of stretch them a little bit to see the veracity of them. I think rule breakers have always been the ones that find out the world is round discover light bulbs, find a new way of creating penicillin, curing polio. It's not the people who follow all the rules. It does require some risk. It does take pushing against the envelope, getting out of the box, the proverbial box, to do something different. That is required in life for success to begin. But I also believe that, as I've said before, we all need coaches. We all need mentors. We need someone who's been there and done that before. Someone who understands the process, knows the pitfalls, and can guide us on how to do the next thing right. And if we don't invest in those people, then what we will get out of them are the crumbs. I was involved in a Facebook conversation yesterday. The young lady was getting frustrated, as is warranted. There are a lot of people out there who look at those of us who are believers in Christ, who express a modicum of religion or faith, and say, well, freely you have been given, so you should freely give. And they apply that not to the grace in our lives, which is what the verse is about, but they apply it to everything in our lives. So forget the fact that you've spent tens of thousands of dollars on your education. Forget the fact that you spent tens of thousands of dollars on your equipment. Forget the fact that you spend tens of thousands of dollars on your marketing and the production of your material that you give away or that you sell. Forget all that. I need it all free. I should get it all free. Because if you were a good person, you'd give it away. If you were a good person, you'd speak at my event for free. If you really knew what you were talking about, then you could come to my event and speak for free to get the publicity so that you could sell coaching clients and products, etc., etc. But don't do it at my event. Just come to my event for free. Give away your knowledge for free. Give away your information for free. Give away your background for free. Give away your investment for free, so that I will feel better and I will look better, and then somehow, some way that'll work out for you later. That's very frustrating for those of us in the business of information. Because while information is free, synthesizing is not. Anybody can go gather the same knowledge that I have on Facebook by picking up a book, by engaging in relationships, by asking questions. But I've spent the better part of 40 years asking people questions, digging into their answers, researching relationships and knowledge about the Bible, about psychology, about neuropsychology, about leadership, about communication skills. Those are the things that deeply fascinate me, and those are the things that I feel like move the needle in many people's lives more than anything else. And so those are the things that I've invested in. And in the same way that this young lady said, I don't want to give it away for free. I'm tired of everybody asking me to give it away for free. That information has great value. And if you feel like it's valuable to you, don't ask for it for free. Be willing to invest in it. You wouldn't go to the doctor and say, hey, I'll tell everybody if you'll just extract this tooth for me. Hey, just go ahead and do that root canal for free, and I'll tell everyone that you did my root canal and did a great job of it for free. Well, what kind of customers do you think are going to come from that? Customers who want it for free for the publicity? We experience the same thing in the DJ business. Any friends of mine that are DJs that are watching can confirm. You wouldn't even begin to believe the number of times that somebody has called us and said, hey, we're going to have 75 people at this event and they're all rich and you should come and DJ it for free because they'll all hire you for their weddings. No, they won't. They'll all call back and say, hey, I was at that other event that you did for free. Will you do this one for free? Why? Because like-minded people hang out together. If they're uber wealthy, they know the value of your work. If they're uber wealthy, they know how to invest in better learning, better entertainment. So who says you're qualified? Is it your experience? Is it this rubber stamp of endorsement? Is it the certification program that you've been through? Is it the fact that you just took the podium and took the mic and said, today I'm a pastor, tomorrow I'm a teacher? Who says you're qualified? And I'm going to be really mean and not answer that question for you, because I want you to answer it yourself. I want you to dig deep enough to ask the question, who sent me to begin with? You should write that down. Who sent me to begin with? What stirred me or made me feel like? Was it an economic decision? Did I wake up one day and go, okay, well, I don't have that job anymore and I don't have any money coming in from here, and It looks like you can make a lot of money in public speaking. I'll go do that. It looks like you can make a lot of money in coaching. I'll go do that. It looks like you can make a lot of money pastoring a church, writing a book, building a seminar, building a webinar. It looks like you can make a lot of money. I'll go do that. And if it was just about the money, why didn't you choose auto mechanic or dentistry? Was it because the barrier to entry was so low? Because there were no qualifications to get over to become that whatever? Who says you're qualified? Do you take your mechanic to your do you take your car to your dentist when it has a problem? Do you take your broken tooth to your mechanic? No, because each of them are qualified differently based on what they've studied and how much of it they've studied. Do you take your car to a mechanic without an ASE certification? Do you know what an ASE certification is? Does that matter to you? Because there are parts changers and then there are mechanics. There are parts changers who plug in that little thing underneath your hood and they go, yep, it says it's one of those. And so they take one of those out and they put it back. And they put the new one in, the problem's still there, they don't know what to do next. Well, I replaced that part and it still says the same code, I don't know what to tell you. And you got a $500 or $600 investment and still have the same problem. I lived that. We had an old Suburban, had a 99 Suburban in 2002, that the engine light would not go off. And under the Texas Clean Air Act, we got a check from the government paid to the mechanic to fix the problem. What they told the mechanic was, we have a budget up to X for you to fix the problem with that car until it passes inspection. So the check was a blank check basically written to the mechanic, and they did about $1,500 worth of work. And the light went off until we got home. And we got home with it, and the light came back on, and the truck started running bad again. I called them back, and I'm like, whatever problem you fixed isn't actually fixed. And they hung up on me and never returned another phone call. So I reported them to the Texas Council of Governments and said, look, you sent them a check, but the work they did made the light go off only long enough to put the sticker on, apparently, because the truck is in worse shape now than it was. I ended up trading it in, not running, and that cost me about $1,500 worth of trade-in value because they never got the light to go off even though they got paid for it. I don't know if they were ASE certified or not. The government apparently thought they were the right kind of mechanics to be able to do the job. They got approved to do that. But who says you're qualified may not just be your certification. Who says you're qualified may not just be the fact that you finished the course, that you went to the seminar, that you graduated from the college degree or the college class. Who says you're qualified may be more about who sent you in the first place and why do you do this? I don't know the answer to that question. But if you're not wrestling with it, then I would question your own audacity and your own authenticity to say, why am I still doing this? If you can't look at it and go, here's how I know I'm supposed to be doing this, and here's how I know I'm qualified, and here's the fruit or the results from the work that I've done. If you've got those things, that's your marketing tool. If you've got those things, if you've got results, if you've got people who said, I've never met anybody who blank like that, then you've got the credentials, the history, the provability. The proof is in the pudding. You got the pudding. And that may be with or without regard for a college education, a college degree, a PhD, a certification. There are old guys that have no degree in horticulture that know more about farming than PhDs in horticulture know. Just because they've been doing it all their lives and they figured out what works and what doesn't work. I would give my request to the experienced veteran who has figured it out by trial and error as fast as I would to the certified, trained, doctorate's degree, blah, 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 blah. That's me. It's my own opinion. But a person who's lived through it, there's a difference between a 24-year-old with a degree in parenting and no kids, and a 30-year-old with no degree and 4 kids. There just is. You may understand the books of it, but if you haven't applied it, I'm not sure. Now, if you're 50 and you have a degree in parenting and you have 3 grown kids, there's probably something there where you said, this is what the book says, but this is what really happens when you try that. Or this is what the book says, but I've got this one personality in my family that doesn't apply to the books at all. Nothing in the books applies to them. It just doesn't happen. So who says you're qualified? Is it your experience? Is it your certification? Is it your training? Is it your know-how? Is it your passion? Who says you're qualified? When you can answer that question with full confidence, not arrogance, with proof, with evidence, with testimonials. When other people say, I've worked with so-and-so and this is what they've accomplished. I attended so-and-so's church. I went to XYZ person's seminar or webinar, or I got their book. I read the book and it impacted my life like this. That's who says you're qualified. Results, evidence. But who says you're qualified? Is it satisfied customers? Is it a certification but you've never had any satisfied customers? I'm not going to answer that question for you. I want you to answer that question yourself. And then as you answer that question, I want you to make note of it because it is your strongest marketing material. The strongest persuasion for people to do business with you, for people to attend your church, for people to follow your teaching, for people to read your books, for people to sign up for your seminars or your webinars, for people to listen to what you have to say, your strongest marketing material, your strongest sales material is not some slick copy. It's the evidence of the results. When you ask the question, who says I'm qualified? When you can answer that question with solid results, you've got a great marketing plan. Just let other people know. As they say, the cheapest form, the most effective form, the richest form of marketing in the world is word of mouth. When other people tell what you've done for them, your business will grow. So who says you're qualified? Answer that question for yourself, and you will be well on your way. But remember that there are probably still some things to learn about your business, about your ministry, about your way of life, and look for a mentor to help you with those so that there's no chance you do damage to somebody else along the way. Not just having and growing a business, but making an impact, a positive, solid impact in the life of others. I'm J Loren Norris, and you've been watching Tell It Like It Is TV. I appreciate you being here today. God bless. If you enjoyed this program, make sure that you hit the subscribe button. And you can subscribe on Facebook Live. You can subscribe on YouTube Live. You can go to the podcast, which is in the YouTube description of this video. Go to the podcast and actually have it loaded right through your iTunes to your phone every day. I do this program Monday through Friday at 6:20 a.m. On Saturdays, it actually sends out an email automatically to your inbox if you're subscribed there, and it will send you the playlist for the week if you're not subscribed on Facebook, YouTube, or iTunes. And if you would just like to get a copy of these past ones, we just passed the 1-year mark. May 19th was the very first episode of Tell It Like It Is, May 19th of 2016. So we're just past the 1-year mark. There are over 300 of these programs available. All of them are faith, family, and freedom based. All of them focus on leadership from a different perspective. But they're always just a little bit different with a common thread. If you've watched more than 4 or 5 of them, you've probably figured out what the common thread is. I hope you enjoy them. I hope you'll share them. And please feel free to comment. Send me private messages if you have questions. I'm glad to answer them. These will not always be free, but for now, they are. Thanks for being here. I appreciate you being a part of my day, and I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of yours. God bless.